Hello, welcome to today's episode of Speaker Series here at the C3 at Indiana Tech. Today we are joined by Stephanie Henry. Stephanie, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So Stephanie, tell us, what do you do?
Well, that's a good question. I get that question a lot, actually. In a nutshell, I am a consultant and an advocate. It's sort of a term I've kind of co-opted, but it's been out there for a little while. But much like an advocate, like you would have for like mental health or for other issues, but advocate as in for I do consulting and advocacy work in the food and agriculture space.
And how in the world did you get there?
Not in any way that I expected to.
Those stories are better, right?
It's definitely been an interesting, non-traditional sort of a route.
Good.
Really just started with the fact that I love to eat.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
That was kind of my premise. I was like, what can I do that's not going to go out of business?
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, so I started with a desire to want to have a farm-to-fork restaurant. And I worked in restaurants and took all of the culinary classes that I could, and I was enrolled in school for, culinary and business. In the process of doing that, I realized a couple of things, which is surprising in a state that's heavily agricultural, which was I couldn't find farmers or enough farmers to supply the things that I needed to run a farm-to-fork restaurant. And I was really dumbfounded. I went to a friend of mine's house. She's a pig farmer. And I was like, what do you guys do with all that corn? And she's like, that? You don't need that. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, go grab some. And I went and I grabbed some out of the field. Obviously, her house is surrounded by cornfields. And it was horrifying. It was hard and ugly and scary looking.
Not edible, yeah.
Not edible. And that's when I really started to learn that there's a big difference between what we grow a lot here in Indiana, being commodity type crops, and a diversified type crop, which are things that we eat. So I had a lot of curiosity, and I started just asking more questions. And the more questions I asked, the more I realized that there was a big gap in our food system, specifically like in our local food system, that the majority of the food that we eat comes from, far and wide. And that, zombie apocalypse sort of stuff was, pretty big at that time. And if the zombie apocalypse hit, we'd all be pretty much in trouble pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
was that a motivation? Prep for the zombie apocalypse?
Well, I mean, always. You have to be prepared.
Okay, good.
You never know what might happen.
I'll make sure to keep your phone number available.
Yeah.
So did you dive right into food as like your first career jump out of your formal education?
Yeah, actually, I actually had the idea to do a farm-to-fork restaurant when I was in second grade.
Okay, so started young.
It was September 10th, 19 something. And I told Mrs. Benjamin I want to have a farm-to-fork restaurant. She's like, why would you want to do that? We've got Shoney's. Nobody cares where their food comes from as long as it's cheap and there's big portions. And I'm like, I think that might be changing. And I was like, but, I'm going to work in this. I know by the time I'm old enough to actually do it, it'll be more of a thing. But, this is something that I'm really interested in. And then from that point on, I started looking more into all the culinary classes that I could take, being like a teacher's assistant, being, home ec, teacher's assistant. Tons of fun. You get to pick all the recipes and plan it out for everybody. And then I was, enrolled in college and going down the culinary path. I assumed I would take the kitchen route and do the cooking part because I'm like, I live in an agricultural state. There's plenty of people doing the farming thing. I don't need to do the farming thing. I remember looking at like agriculture when I was looking at college course and going, agriculture. I'll never do that.
You're
stuff.
silly.
Yeah, there's plenty of people doing agriculture. Little did I know. Yeah, there's a big difference.
So you talked a lot about the constant draw to that field. No pun intended. Okay, pun intended.
Yeah.
Pun intended. The draw to that, and there's a difference between that substanceless passion, if you will, versus a real interest in something. Can you talk about the difference between you being a more interest-driven career path maker as opposed to someone that just has passion in something and hopes to get money out of that?
That's a good question. I mean, it started as something that I was doing kind of like while I was working. I worked in restaurants and everything else like that, and I would do community gardens and other volunteer stuff in my part time. And you run into a lot of people who are really passionate about growing stuff or about, supporting local food, which is fantastic. I think that this is not necessarily the greatest field for someone who wants to like get into like a quick turnkey sort of industry and think they're going to make a big profit fast. Because the reality is it's a very long and slow process. Because the very core of it, agriculture is not really something that technology's figured out a way to speed up. We figured out a way to make it more efficient or more productive, but not to speed it up. There's still going to be that time, between planting something, the time that it takes to grow, and then processing it and cooking it. It just takes time. And I've seen a lot of people get involved in this sort of work and get discouraged because of the amount of stuff that needs to be done. And I strongly encourage anyone, if you're like thinking about what's a possible thing that I can get into, like we absolutely need more people doing ag, and not like ag in the way that people think, just like, laying out a row of stuff, because there is definitely that, but there's a lot of ag tech. There's a lot of business. I just went to the Forbes Ag Tech Conference in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and it was incredible to see some of the developments that people have made in equipment and in programming and in sensing technology. And all of that helps to make agriculture more effective and more efficient and more productive. But there's a lot of opportunities in the field, but it's definitely something that if you're not really passionate about, there's a good chance you might not stick it out, because there's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
And I shared a video, recently, I think it was the Les Brown, the story of the Chinese bamboo, and it's like I've planted an entire field of Chinese bamboo and I've been watering it for years and years. And everybody's like, why don't you plant some tomatoes or something? I'm like, this field is totally planted, but it's going to take years for literally the seeds that I've been sowing and watering and fertilizing to really start to show where other people can see that something's going on. I don't need to necessarily be in the dirt and see what's going on underneath it to know that, because I know that this is the process for it.
Yeah. So you mentioned ag tech, and some people may not think agriculture when they think of technology. So just talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in ag tech and different ways that maybe some of us are John Deere or some of the International Harvester, some of the big boys there, how they could get involved in student level agricultural technology.
I am just now really getting to understand myself a lot of what is going on in ag tech. There's some really incredible like innovations and things that are going on that I just have like the barest knowledge of. I just know that I think of, agriculture technology is kind of like where like computers and cell phones were sort of in like the late 80s, early 90s, especially like controlled environment systems. And we're starting to see a lot more investment, a lot more, companies getting into that space and investing in it. And that's what needs to happen. We need to put more money into that and put that technology in the hands of young people, because that's what happened with computers and cell phones is they made a bunch of them and put them in hands of kids and let them take them apart, put them back together. And, they innovated. And that's how we got to the incredible smart tech that we have now. And I think the same thing is true with ag technology. I know John Deere and all of them are doing some really incredible stuff with their tractors and all of that sort of stuff. But I'll be honest, some of the stuff that I saw at the Forbes Ag Tech, Summit, these small groups of like students that are creating these robots and these sensing technologies and whatnot are, they're serious disruptors, and we need more of that to really push that edge of technology in agriculture and to imagine and create the solutions that, more established organizations or groups might not think to try, because it's just so far out of their wheelhouse.
Yeah, so foreign. What was the neatest piece of technology you saw there?
Obviously, like I really liked the drones because that was really cool. There's this really awesome, like military looking piece of equipment that does core samples. And so you can plan it and plot it so that it'll go out and it'll automatically like take a core sample, it puts it into this bag and seals it and numbers it and all that other stuff. And so you can get consistent core samples throughout a large area, without having to go out there and do it yourself. And that was really handy. I could see how that would be really effective, help for, a smaller farmer who wants to really hone in on what the quality is on their soil, but doesn't necessarily have the time to be out there tromping through the field, shoveling a bag of, dirt and labeling it.
It scales with time. Definitely.
It is, absolutely.
So you touched briefly on community gardens. So why don't you talk a little bit about these alternative agriculture opportunities that you've been investing in?
I started with a community garden, and it started actually when I was in college because I was trying to go to school and I was trying to work and I was trying to feed myself, and one of these things was not happening. So one thing led to another, and I ended up getting engaged with my neighborhood association. Actually, I went to ask my neighbor if I could borrow his tools, and it turns out he was the president. So, newsflash, learned a whole lot about ordinances and codes and zoning and having to do everything the proper way.
And
which
then it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Yeah. Well, maybe it did a little bit, but.
I mean, I wonder sometimes because it would have been easier just to throw a garden in and just claim ignorance. But actually, I'm really grateful for him pointing out all of the things that I need to take into consideration, because it really opened my eyes to, what the challenges are. There's a lot of terms that get thrown around, and one of those terms is sustainable. And I feel like that's a catch term that some people take like negatively, or take to seem like it has to be only organic and, very granola, that sort of thing. For me, sustainable means something that, like has a circular mentality. Like it's good for the grower, it's good for the environment, it's good for the community, and it has a good product. And there's a lot of ways to be sustainable. And when it comes to like a community garden, sustainable for me is not necessarily doing guerrilla gardening, because it's not sustainable in the long term, because guerrilla gardening by default doesn't have like a identified, organizational structure and support structure and point of contact. So there's no way to really monitor who's in charge of what and how to, resolve issues clearly. And it typically leads to a lot of hurt feelings and upset people. So, taking the route of looking at the ordinances and code and zoning and things like that, to really understand what those challenges are, and then to try to work with the organizations and individuals who are in charge of determining what that is and enforcing that, to come up with a solution that makes it easier for communities to do community gardens. It's been a path that I've taken, which is, it's a lot longer path. And it's very, very tedious, because there's a lot of nuance and procedure that has to be taken into consideration. But in the long term, it's worth it, because when we're done, we'll have a system that has a standard route for people to access information and resources, and have rules and regulations that account for these sorts of things, which when we started doing this is something that people had talked about. And so back in the day, no one had rules about gardens. And now they don't have rules about gardens, so they don't know how to regulate it. And that's kind of a challenge. It seems like a obvious thing, like, of course you can grow stuff, but it's a lot more complicated nowadays.
Yeah. Not as easy to say don't have chickens as...
We don't talk about the chickens.
Okay. I didn't realize that was a delicate subject.
It is. It's amazing how many people can get upset over it.
Okay, so no chickens. We don't talk about chickens. No chickens. So you started out thinking more about the cooking aspect of food, and you ended up on the community development aspect of food. So talk to us about how you noticed the attributes of the communities you were working with, and how that led you to realize that this is what you really needed to focus on, as opposed to what you thought you needed to focus on at the beginning.
That's a good question. So I started in the food part, and I started working towards the growing, because every cook will tell you that your dishes are only as good as your ingredients. And ultimately, the fresher and the higher quality the ingredients are, the better the stuff.
That's like a leadership lesson in itself.
But again, I had that, unending curiosity, and, that whole 5 whys, I kind of take that to like the 9th degree, and I just keep asking why, and then how, and then who, and then why not, until I've exhausted all the possible questions. And I'm like, what other questions didn't I ask? But it was, taking that full systems look and approach and recognizing that the challenges that I was dealing with doing a community garden, others were dealing with a community garden, and that it was more than just me wanting to grow food or me wanting to have a restaurant. I started to, recognize things like, our infant mortality rates, and a lot of that can be, directly tied back to the nutrition, the nutrition of the mother, the nutrition of the young babies, but then also school performance. I started cooking because, no offense, mom, but my mom can't cook.
She's not watching. Yeah.
I hope she's not watching. But it's like it was either learn to cook or be very hungry, and I learned at a really young age that I couldn't focus, I couldn't study because I was always hungry, and I was always like wondering, when lunch was, when snack was the next time I could, get a granola bar. And we have kids throughout our community, not only here but across the country, who are dealing with that on a daily basis, and so not only are they distracted, but they don't have the fuel to actually not only process, but to build that neural connection that is learning. And it's like trying to put Kool-Aid in a Ferrari. It doesn't really work.
I've never tried it, but I'll take your word for it.
I wouldn't suggest it. I haven't tried it either. I just know it's not a great idea.
That's fair.
But yeah, just looking at how all of those overlap, and that when you pull on that string, you can't just deal with like the one issue that you can just deal with the one issue that's in front of you. I just kept feeling compelled to keep pulling on that string and kind of find out where can we have a more sustainable and substantive kind of impact on this, and not just an immediate one.
So you found a real need, and you decided to try to tackle solutions for that need. And it sounds like while there are some other initiatives and some other like thinkers, that you kind of struck it on your own in that direction. How did you build your community or your support structure as you developed that particular career path?
Well, I started by looking for courses to take.
Okay.
And at the time, this was a little while ago, there really weren't a lot of courses on agriculture, on community agriculture, urban agriculture, not in this area. A lot of the courses, like Ohio's got some really interesting courses. Michigan has some really interesting courses. But I chose this community, a long time ago. This is my hometown, and I felt very committed to this community, and I didn't want to leave. And I wanted to find a way that I could stay involved in the community and learn to do this work. So I did a lot of what I call Automobile University, which is a lot of podcasts, a lot of late night researching of different communities and how initiatives like this had been undertaken in those communities and sort of tactics that they'd used.
Did you reach out to any of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
How did that go?
Really well. I mean, the thing is, people who are doing this work, by and large, are some of the most amazing people that I know. We all have a passion and a love for food in some way, and they generally tend to be pretty energetic and outgoing sort of people. And we all are a little crazy because you have to be a little crazy to continue to do this work sometimes because you are dealing with pretty huge risks. I mean, being a farmer is really risky. You're putting a lot of time and money into something with a limited, kind of guarantee of sale, which is where a lot of that commodity stuff comes in. But, that's, shown in the last couple of decades to be not, really reliable either. So
a lot of what you're talking about and the impact and the connection sound a lot like social entrepreneurship. Would you consider yourself a social entrepreneur?
A very accidental one.
Oh, yes.
I actually am very introverted by nature. But
so you love this setup right here,
yeah. I'm not going to tell you how nervous I was going to come here. So, definitely an accidental entrepreneur. Just because I waited for a while, just volunteering with organizations for someone else to kind of start this and just to do it. And I just wasn't seeing anybody kind of diving in and kind of putting the kind of effort into it that I knew needed to happen, because this is a lot of work and we are really far behind. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. Because I couldn't stand to sit back and wait for someone else to take advantage of these opportunities. And I started going to conferences and I started going to seminars. And I started doing deep dives into the different websites of organizations and groups that I had heard about and was researching. And that's actually how I got my internship, because the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, amazing organization, I'd been kind of stalking their website for a couple of years because they had incredible material, but it was really easy to get sidetracked. And I was in the course going to some conferences, and I'd become a grant reviewer, and I was talking to some other people about, how can I get a quicker education or hands-on experience on how to really take this work to the next level, and really making those one-on-one connections with people that I, emailed or called or, been following online. And they suggested NSAC, and I looked, and they had internships. Internships are amazing. It's a little bit of a challenge for me because I am not currently enrolled in college. So that was a little bit of a hurdle, but luckily NSAC did not have that as a requirement. And so I was like, this is a national organization. I probably have a snowball's chance, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I applied for the grassroots internship, and they chose me. And I had 3 weeks to pack up everything and go to DC. And I cried my eyeballs out because I was terrified. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. What was I thinking? But at the same time, I'm like, how can I say no? That opportunity to go literally to the fountainhead of all of, policy and procedure, to this organization that's been doing this work for pretty much longer than I've been alive, that is so engaged and has so many members across the country. I was like, I'm either going to do this, I'm going to die doing it, or, I'm going to learn incredible lessons. And I'm still here.
Yeah. I'm happy you did that.
Yeah, I'm very happy I didn't die either. No, it was an incredible experience. Really being able to meet and talk to and work with the people who live and breathe this on a daily basis. And then I had the pleasure of helping to facilitate one of our 2 annual meetings with our members, which is literally like a rock star who's who of agriculture from across the country. And it was so amazing to sit in this room and have breakfast and lunch and sessions with these people who've been doing this work, and to have conversations with them, and to realize how down to earth and how passionate and intelligent and everything that they are. And they were so helpful in talking to me about, some of the challenges that we have in our community, suggesting different things that I can try when I get back. And even now, I'm still in contact with a lot of them about, things that we're working on, and they're eager to come and to help to teach sessions or to advise us on things. And that really has been a game changer, because it's helped to create this network that I can have access to help to support the people who are really catching on to this work and getting more engaged in our community, to resources and people who've been doing it for a while. So,
do you have any special considerations for any introverts about trying to make as big of an impact as you have?
I don't know how much of an impact I've made, but I mean, for me, it was just, I had to get out and do it. I don't know. I don't have any secret tips or tricks. I'm terrified pretty much every time I go somewhere and do something. And there's a lot of times that I cry afterwards thinking about all the things that I should have said or whatnot. But, just going and showing up, and keeping your eyes and ears open, listening to people who've been around and done stuff. It may not have an exact bearing to the very thing that I'm working on or that I asked them about, but I'm always learning stuff from people who are in these spaces, and just being patient with the process, which is really challenging at times.
In the communities that you're a part of, and the who's who of agriculture, are they a lot of those extroverts? And do you have to?
No, surprisingly, there are definitely some extroverts, but a lot of them are introverts. A lot of farm type people were kind of homebodies. We are happy, with the peace and quiet, of the field or a laboratory or whatever else like that. But it's that passion for what we're doing that kind of unites us. And the term wonk, I guess is one that I've been learning and that's been thrown around. We get wonky. They call them like policy wonks, or we're like ag wonks. So we get like really like we like to nerd out about all the little ag discussions about the nuance of
Good.
this.
You found your tribe.
Yeah, it was actually a lot of fun. I walked into a room and I wasn't the first one to start these conversations, so you just like sit back and like listen.
My people, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
well, good. So taking what you've learned about your building your tribe or finding your tribe, what kind of processes did you take to build that tribe, or was it more organic, or was it? Did you have key steps that you noticed along the way that said this really helped me find the people that I want to be a part of?
Well, I had to get more active in social media, which I did not have the Twitters for the longest time, because I don't think that I do things that are interesting enough to have the Twitters. But
there's plenty of people that don't do anything.
Well, I had a conversation with someone and they shared, how I could use it to kind of just share with other people who may be curious, a little bit about the sort of things that I'm experiencing and give them an opportunity to kind of, tune in here and there. And that's actually been really helpful. A lot of people that I didn't expect have told me that they followed, things that I'm doing, and like heard about me through stuff that I was posting, and that look forward to hearing some of the things that I share. So putting stuff out there, really, being true to myself. I know it sounds kind of kitschy, but I know how much of an impact this work is going to make on our community. I know how much of an impact it's made on other communities. And even though other people may not always understand that and may think, you should, just get a regular job, or, why don't you just, work for someone else and do that, whatever. Being true to my passion and my commitment to this, I think does more for me reaching out to other people, because they see that this is what I'm doing like every day, all day.
Yeah.
Sometimes really, really late at night. Really, really early in the morning.
Yep.
And I think that speaks more to people than anything that I could really say. And that helps to draw people in.
Because you never know who you're going to impact, right?
Never know who's watching.
Yeah. Well, we know, but well, super. Well, now's my favorite time of our talk, which is rapid fire question. And so we have some questions for you. I'm going to ask you the question, and you're going to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay. Now, I will preface the last couple of rapid fires have not been very rapid, which is fine if you want to expand on it. But if you want to just do our word and make it rapid, get it over with, in case you're feeling the pressure, it's totally fun.
Okay.
Ready?
Go for it.
If you had a spirit animal, what would it
be? A dragon.
Any particular kind?
A magical dragon.
Oh, beautiful. The best gift you've ever received?
The best gift I ever received. Actually, my mentor, Leanne, is an amazing gift to me. Her seeing me and my passion for what I was trying to do and coming alongside to share her expertise and knowledge has been a greater gift than anything that I could have imagined. And it's a gift that continues to keep giving, and I hope to just someday be as much of a community asset as that woman is.
Oh, that was good.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of people who've done a lot of good work. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to improve on it.
Or bring it here.
Yeah, that too.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how cool are you?
It depends.
Whatever definition you want.
I'm going to say a 7 just because I really like the number 7.
Okay.
And I'm not the most boring person, but at the same time, I'm not everyone's kind of cool.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm an unusual kind of cool.
That's fair.
My cat likes me.
Oh, good. Well, check. That's a 10 then, right? What is your favorite song?
I listen to music constantly. Like my Spotify is like air to me. Right now I'm totally jamming on Sia's I'm Still Here. I kind of have a thing for Sia in most of her songs, but her latest one, I'm Still Here, is really great for me right now.
What's your go-to flower?
Go-to flower. The one that I can plant.
No, one that survives.
I like bulbs and things like that. I like planting stuff that's going to continue to come back and grow and whatnot. I like cut flowers because I'm a girl. I mean, they're pretty, but I really like bulbs and stuff because I have more than one.
Come back. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of tech?
When I think of tech?
I mean, kind of given our talk earlier. Yeah.
Opportunity.
Oh, good.
Opportunity. I see a lot of opportunities that's opening up for careers and for entrepreneurship and for development in our communities and in ag and in a lot of other spaces. It's also a little scary, but with, any new advance, there's always, risks.
You have a favorite sport?
I don't necessarily do a sport. I kind of do I throw axes.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I throw axes. It's fun. I also do some archery and whatnot.
Oh, all right. So very zombie apocalypse then. I am definitely calling you.
Yeah, I know all the right kind of people.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
That's the kind of crew to have.
Food and yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Oh, good. That's Barbara. Add that to my list there. If you could have invisibility or super strength, which one would you rather have?
Super strength. I'm usually pretty invisible, and it's kind of
I already have that.
Yeah, ability. I've already got invisibility.
It's good to be self-aware, right? Yeah, good.
I have chameleon-like abilities.
Oh, good,
good.
Blend in. Excellent. Yeah. I already have it. And then what would be one piece of advice you'd have to any of our students?
I mean, I feel like self-awareness is something that's really key to everything that I'm doing. I recently completed the Leadership Fort Wayne course, and as part of that, I did my Gallup Strengths. And that was an incredible tool for me to help to really identify within myself kind of where my strengths were. I'd always felt that my strengths were, and the things that I had been trying to work on improving, and realizing that I'd spent a lot of time working on things that other people thought that I should be working on. So taking that time to really sit down and have that hard conversation with yourself, and more than once, because you're kind of argue with yourself most likely, or you may not want to maybe own up to everything yourself the first couple of times, but really sitting down and having those hard discussions with yourself and looking inwardly at what really is your motivation, what are you really passionate about. For me, it was losing a couple of people in a short amount of time, and it made me sit back and really look at what am I doing with my life and what would happen if I was gone unexpectedly, and what would I be leaving behind. And I didn't feel that I was really doing things that were true to who I was and that were impactful. And that made me change what I was doing drastically. So realizing that it was more important to do what I was really passionate about than what other people felt that I should be doing.
You can fail at things you don't want to do and fail at things you want to do. Yep. Might as well fail at something you want to do.
Exactly.
Well, excellent. Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next week.